All right, let's give it a second to do all the things. Best of Germany's Rust Belt internet here.
Done.
Thank you.
This is where I need some hold music. All right, there we go. So you should all have a message. This meeting is being live streamed. It's very slowly. Okay, there it goes. So, all right.
Excellent. Looks like we are good to go. Eileen, thank you for getting that set up, and welcome to everyone joining us both on the Zoom platform, as well as to those of you tuning in via Democrats Abroad's Facebook page. We are so glad to have you here, whether it's your morning, afternoon, you're signing off from work in the evening. Glad that you're making some time to join us at Democrats Abroad. My name is Candace Karastan, and I serve as Democrats Abroad's International Chair. And in case you aren't familiar with DA, we are the largest organization of US citizens living outside of the United States, and we're also an official arm of the Democratic Party. At our core, it's our mission to provide Americans abroad a voice in our government and to elect Democratic candidates by getting out the overseas vote. I know I don't need to repeat it with this audience. We all know how much is at stake in 2022, but just some quick numbers for you: 34 US Senate seats, all 435 US representative seats, 46 state legislatures, including in Texas, and 36 governorships, again, including in Texas. That's what's on the line in November of 2022. And this is your chance now as Democrats to determine which candidates are going to go up against those Republicans in the November general election. Texas has its Democratic primary election coming up on March 1st, and that's why we're all here today, to get to know the candidates who are running for these important offices, where the decisions that impact you abroad and your families back home are made. If you haven't yet done so, there's still time to participate in the March 1st Democratic primary. You can go get your ballot at votefromabroad.org. And if you haven't done so, I would encourage you to get over there right away, get that ballot request in, and it'll remain good both for the March primary and the November general election. Just a quick note about tonight's event and what we're really here to do. At Democrats Abroad, we sat down, we reflected on 2020, we used 2021 to plan for this important year. And at our core, we have really set out to bring the elections and the issues closer to you as Americans abroad, so that you know who and what is on the ballot, and so that lawmakers stateside know the issues unique to the American abroad community. I'd just like to thank every candidate who's made time to join tonight's event and speak to Democrats living abroad. In this vein, I'd also like to thank our Texas state team. This is a new concept within Democrats Abroad, to connect Texans around the world and get their ballots back to Texas, particularly Jennifer von Esdorf, who leads Texans Abroad and also coordinates all of our battleground state outreach. Thank you for organizing today's Meet the Candidate session.
Awesome.
One quick last note. I do just want to emphasize that Democrats Abroad has not and will not endorse any candidate in the March 1st Democratic primary in Texas, and we are committed to remaining neutral for the duration of the primary. All candidates for the races, including Lieutenant Governor, Texas 35 Congressional, and Land Commissioner, and Attorney General, were all invited to speak at our events. If you missed the previous Meet the Candidate session with some other candidates, you can find that recording on our Facebook page. With that, I will turn it over to Jennifer, who will introduce the candidates, and we can get started. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Candace. Welcome to our second Texans Abroad Meet the Primary Candidates panel. We are going to be listening to candidates for the offices of Land Commissioner, Texas's 35th Congressional District, and Attorney General. We would also like to thank our panelists today, including leaders from several Democrats Abroad caucuses, the Progressive Caucus, the Hispanic Caucus, the Global Black Caucus, and the Global Women's Caucus. I'm Jennifer von Esdorf, Democrats Abroad Global State Teams Coordinator, and I'm also representing Texans Abroad. I was born and raised in Abilene, Texas, and have lived in Germany for the past 20 years. It has been my great pleasure to be a part of the team helping to establish our state-focused outreach and our efforts to assist and encourage Texans living overseas to cast their vote up and especially down the ballot. In fact, We already increased the numbers of ballots returned to Texas by 50%, up to 60,000 in 2020, compared to just 40,000 in 2016. Closer to 90,000 overseas voters requested a Texas ballot, which shows just how key the work is to ensure that Texans living outside the US can make their voices heard. We would love for you to join us on February 12th for our next Texans Abroad planning meeting. Also, if you need any help voting, please refer to our guide to voting in Texas from abroad. That'll be dropped into the chat. And we've also got detailed ballot return instructions because our ballots have to be postal mailed back so that you can have a really easy time of printing your ballot and assembling all of the envelopes that come with it. All right, at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Carol Moore, our events coordinator, to introduce Michael Lang.
Thank you, Jennifer. And may I say, it is a real pleasure to introduce Michael Lang, who is a former colleague in Democrats Abroad UK when he and his family lived in London. Michael is running for the rather unique but very important position of Commissioner of the Texas General Land Office. This office manages Texas's publicly owned land with over 800 employees. The royalties and proceeds from land sales contribute significant monies to Texas's permanent school fund. The GLO also provides benefits to Texas veterans, relief from natural disasters, and manages state lands, including the Alamo. Michael was born in Texas and grew up in Houston and on the family ranch in Waller County. He graduated from the University of Texas, Austin, studied finance at Rice University and advanced management at INSEAD, France. He has worked for small and large companies managing investments around the world. Michael will explain how this public institution can be better managed to deliver higher quality K-12 education to the families in Texas. He will work to see Texas as a leader in delivering better services to veterans and make Texas a small business champion for employers and employees. Michael, we are very interested to hear what issues are of most importance to Texas voters as you campaign, and what you see you can do as Land Commissioner to address them. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, Jennifer, Carol, and to Democrats Abroad, wherever you are in whichever country, I had the great honor and pleasure of being a member of Democrats Abroad for many years and going to 2 national conventions in Los Angeles and Boston, and also being your international treasurer. So it's wonderful to be with you, and it's wonderful to know that there's 90,000 Texans you're going to get their voter ballots. It's really helpful. No question that no Democrat has won a statewide seat for 28 years. So what you do in Democrats Abroad, those votes, it matters. And thank you for that. As Carol said, my name is Michael Lang. I was born in Houston, but I grew up both in the city and in rural Texas. And that's important because the county I grew up on, the ranch, was a Democratic county, and then it changed and never got back again. And if we're going to win in November, we need to get back some of rural Texas. And you need a candidate that understands rural Texas as well as urban Texas. As Carol's mentioned, I was born and raised. I actually am the son of working class immigrants. My father was the first person in his family to ever finish high school. And he came to America not speaking English, just wanting to be an American. Now, 40 years later, here I am running for Texas Land Commissioner. I've been a Democrat since the age of 16. And as Carol said, I have 40 years of professional leadership experience in small and large businesses. But one thing about the Texas Land Commissioner's office, 99% of Texans don't really understand what it does, even though it's the oldest public office in Texas. So let me quickly go through it with you. The budget for 2022 is $3.4 billion with 800 employees. Texas, if it was a separate country, would be the 9th largest in the world by GDP. There are 3 million small businesses in Texas, which represent 45% of all the workers in Texas. There are 1.4 million Texas veterans, which the Land Commissioner looks after. The public school system, I want you to think about a football field. Now, I want you to think about 13 million of those. That's what the Land Commissioner looks after. And those 13 million football fields and 13 million acres generate an excess of $1 billion a year, which goes to the permanent school fund, which helps kids from kindergarten to 12th grade. Kids, pays teacher salaries, and also helpful to parents. But also critical is natural disasters. 1,200 miles of Texas coastline. Imagine you're standing on a beach in Texas looking into the Gulf of Mexico and 10.35 miles out into the Gulf. That entire 1,200 miles plus that 10 miles out, that is what the land commissioner is responsible for. Hurricanes, natural disasters, oil spills, shipwrecks, anything critically important. The other issue is environmental safety. On all this public land, we have to make absolutely certain that the environment's being taken up, and that's a critical issue for us right now. And also, we talked about the Alamo complex. Currently, it's going underneath a $450 million renovation. And non-COVID times, 1.6 million people a year visit the Alamo, a huge economic boost for San Antonio. And the land commissioner is responsible for all that. So it's a very complex role with lots of different things. But people say, Michael, what are your priorities? What would you do? My priorities, number one, is to keep the people of Texas safe. I think any leader, that should be number one priority. Number two, to make certain that every single Texan is treated with the same equal respect. No matter who you are, what you do, who you love, it doesn't matter. Everyone gets treated with equal respect. The next is to be a man for others. I grew up in a family where you had to take care of yourself, you had to take care of your family, but also it was very important that you remembered you were part of a community. The kindness of strangers helped my family have our American dream. So be a man for others is an essential part of it. And lastly, every day as land commissioner, I would work hard to make sure your life is better. In the land commissioner's job, if you do it well, and if you're effective, you actually can make people's lives safer and better every day. Let me talk about three different things I'll do quickly. Right now, you may not know this, but Texas, in terms of reading skills, ranks 45th in the nation, 45th. 44 people do it better. It's not because of the kids. It's not because of COVID. It's not the teachers, and it's certainly not the parents. It's the system that's wrong. As land commissioner, I could actually create an organization that would take it from the bottom 5 in the nation to the top 5 in the nation. What's the vision for that? Number one, if people can read better, employers would want to hire more people. And guess what? They would be better paying jobs, which would drive the economy, which would make people's lives better, make families safer, and very importantly, continue to build the quality of the Texas public school system, which is in trouble right now. So that's a huge different thing. Secondly, veterans, 1.4 million of those. Right now, Texas veterans is a mess. Most veterans don't even know what their state benefits are. So I have a plan called Texas Has Your Six, or Texas Has Your Back. It would take the opaqueness and bad service and do this. Number one, it would actually make the products competitive. It would make them much less costly, but make them easy to understand and access, which veterans need. And this is a critical issue. They're not being served correctly. I believe that veterans, especially Texas veterans, have sacrificed enough. And it's important that we give them the gold standard, not the mediocre below average standard. And lastly, on the coastlines, what can we do? In the last 20 years, we're a lot better now at managing things like hurricanes. And let's be honest, with climate change, there's going to be a lot more hurricanes. Well, you know where we don't do a good job? Is after the hurricane's over and the cameras are gone and TV reporters are gone, you have people who've been hurt, lost their homes, need things. The after the event planning is not there. It can take months and years. I'll give you one example. Current Land Commissioner George P. Bush, he had the ability to give Harris County, the place most affected, my home, hurricane money from the federal government, not the state. So here's the county most affected. They asked for $1 billion. You know how much he gave them? Zero. Can you imagine? The people most in need got zero money. There are $2 billion plus in federal hurricane money waiting to be released only because the land commissioner won't get his job done. It's unforgivable. But here's another interesting. The domestic violence against women and children goes up 40%. What if you had a land commissioner that knew that? What if in the planning for the after the event planning, those kind of things were dealt with partnerships with people like the Houston Area Women's Center and other places that are geared towards that? And also make sure that no matter who you are, your home gets fixed properly and it gets taken care of and you're not forgotten, which people feel right now. A huge way that the land commissioner can impact your life. Alamo Complex. It's a year and a half behind schedule and it's a mess, but you can fix that. But here's the important thing to remember about the land commissioner's role. It's not a light switch. You don't have the ability to turn things on and off. It's a group of partnerships. For example, the Alamo alone, there are at least 4 different groups who control the Alamo. The land commissioner has overall responsibility, but there are 3 other groups who can sidetrack what you're doing. So partnerships are important. And very importantly, and not lastly, environmental safety. I have been all over Texas. There's no place in Texas I have not been to several times. I have been to the oil fields of West Texas. I've seen what goes on there, and it's amazing if you've never been. I know that there's good actors, bad actors, and mediocre in terms of environmental safety. And if you want to have an immediate impact and make the air cleaner and the water right away, all you need to do is ensure that federal regulations and state regulations for environmental safety are actually taking place and doing correctly. They're not. So you have an immediate impact you can improve. So as you can see, the land commissioner's job is very important, and you have to be effective. 40 years of working in large, complex organizations. I've run businesses bigger than 800 people. I've worked in organizations over $30 billion a year. So I bring effectiveness right away. I can actually make decisions and get things going. The last thing I think important is diversity. Within Texas, diversity, multicultural, is changing rapidly. Within the land commissioner's office, it's over 60% Caucasian. As land commissioner, you get to appoint people to boards. And when I appoint people to those boards, I'm going to make it look like Texas. Diverse, multicultural, incredibly competent group of people who care about Texas. And that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm Michael Lang. I'm asking for your vote for Texas Land Commissioner. We have a lot of work to do. And just as a closing, before I answer your questions, we are going to be up against, in November, a hardcore right-wing person. Lyndon Baines Johnson said, the purpose of a primary is to elect a candidate, not who we may like the most, but the Democrat who has the best chance of winning in November. That's what we need to do, because they're going to come hard at us. So in your thought process, ask yourself, who in November of 2022 is going to have the best chance of winning against that candidate? Democrats Abroad, it's been wonderful. I look forward to answering your questions, and thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Michael. That was a great plea for us to really strongly consider who we vote for, and we look forward to all casting our ballots in this primary. We've got a couple of questions from our Global Black Caucus. I'll turn it over to you, Jazz.
Yes, hi there, and thank you very much for joining in on today's event. Just would like to point out as well, we received a great reminder last night to check if we got our ballots, and I'm a Texas voter as well in El Paso. And surprise, surprise, I did not receive my ballot yet. So I gave it a call, they checked, they could not find it. And the very friendly person there in the clerk's office, they helped me out, and now everything is sorted out. So everybody, please make sure that if you registered, well, first of all, go out and register. Second of all, if you registered, that you receive your ballot, and if not, go and get it sorted because time is running out. Mr. Lang, the Global Black Caucus does have a question for you. So what measures would you take to diversify the portfolio of renewables and lead the states toward a low emission future? And how would you do that?
It's a great question. And of course, energy management is a mixed bag in Texas. The land commissioner looks after the public lands, and the Texas Railroad Commission looks after everything else, which is actually the majority. But I think the first thing is, I'll go back to what I said earlier. You have to make sure that what we're doing now is safe and clean and right, and it's not. So if you want to have an immediate impact, you make sure that the current environmental regulations, both state and federal, are actually being adhered to. Now, with those 13 million acres that the land commissioner looks after, there's a lot of places in West Texas that are just kind of barren, and what's underneath it is oil. But what's on top of it is kind of barren rockland. So there are two big issues in Texas. Right now, for example, there are 29 million people, 29 million Texans, plus the 90,000 overseas. In 30 years' time, 2050, there's going to be 54 million people. Now think about that change. Water is a critical issue. A lot's being talked about, a lot's being said, but nothing's being done. And that's what needs to happen. We need to think about the water infrastructure. It's incredibly important when you go from 29 to 50 million plus people. But the other obvious thing that you can do on public lands, where every year, every few months, the technology and science is improving, is solar. Wind is expensive and not effective, but solar is doing quite well. So with 13 million acres, a lot of land available where there's really not good enough for agriculture, because if agriculture was there, you'd want to do that instead, because you got to feed people first. But solar, if you want to diversify quickly, inexpensively, and efficiently with the technology movements in solar, that's where you go.
Thank you very much. I also responded very highly when you were just speaking about diversity. How will you ensure that people of color who are predominantly living in areas that are filled with pesticides, lead pipes, and other hazards have the same access to rebuilding their homes and livelihoods after, for example, a climate catastrophe?
I mean, I'm very sad that in the 21st century in America, it's a good question. We even have to ask that question. We shouldn't have to. And I go back to my original priorities. If you believe that your number one priority is to keep the people of Texas safe, that's all the people. Everyone has to be kept safe. And secondly, if you truly believe that everyone should be treated with equal respect, no matter who they are or what they do, then everyone gets treated the same way. I talked earlier about the real gaping failure right now in Texas planning for natural disasters. And that's the post-event after the TV cameras have left and people are left standing. Those communities of color who may not necessarily have insurance and things like this to the same levels, they're the people hurting the most. So the first thing I would do if I was elected land commissioner is release those billions of dollars that are sitting in Washington simply because the land commissioner isn't getting his job done. Get their money into their hands. If I was land commissioner, it would have been in their hands last July when it should have been. But again, with planning, you should look, no matter who you are, where you are, everyone's treated the same way. But the most important thing is you have effective plans in place for years after that to make sure it's been done. And that's the problem. It goes for 6 months and nothing happens. And people left 2 years later, 3 years later. Is anyone helping me? I don't understand. We have to stop that. And I'm going to stop that.
Great. Thank you very much for answering our questions. Jennifer, I think you wanted to have some participants or Facebook questions.
We've got one more question from our Progressive Caucus. I'll hand over to Caitlin.
Hi, everyone. Yes, thank you, Jennifer. My name is Caitlin Kennedy. I'm a Houston voter, and I'm here representing the Global Progressive Caucus today. So just really quickly, wanted to say a few words about the Global Progressive Caucus. We're really striving right now to inform our members, all members of Democrats Abroad, and really all Americans living overseas about key primary races in the 2022 election cycle. And our goal really is to engage voters early, focus our attention on crucial challenges that we're all facing right now, and prepare all of us to vote for the candidates who are ready to address those challenges most effectively. So to that end, we have started a pivotal primaries project, and we're focusing first on Texas. So our chair, Bruce Murray, he's going to pop some important resources in the chat for y'all about the Texas primaries. And we are looking to update our Progressive Caucus webpage very soon with resources from our pivotal primaries project. So keep your eyes out for those additions, which should be coming by the end of the month. And if you want to help us out by helping us create resources and information for your state's primaries, then please feel free to reach out to us at progressivecaucus@democratsabroad.org. So yeah, thank you, Michael, for being here with us. Our question for you concerns a report that came out in The Guardian in December, which said that oil companies' profits soared to $1.74 billion last year as US gas prices also rose. What plans do you have to end fossil fuel subsidies and overcome resistance from powerful oil and gas companies and lobbies if you're elected into office?
Okay. Well, again, we talked earlier, it's a great question, and it's a challenge for all of us. It's a federal, it's a state, it's a local, and it's a county issue for lots of different reasons. But the most important thing is it's a partnership. The land commissioner is not some guru who can just flip a switch and do whatever they want. It doesn't work that way. That's not how state government works in Texas. It's about partnerships. And you know what? You have to start by building a ladder. Right now, it's kind of all over the place because the ruling regime and the Republicans have been a disappointment machine for education, for environment, everything. So you have to build a foundation first with partnerships. You have to say, look, here's where we are, and this is where we need to go. And this is the critical thing. But what I would say to you, that if a Democrat gets elected, when a Democrat gets elected in November of this year for the first time in 28 years, the critical thing, and I believe, is that Democrat has to be effective right away. You have to say, look, did the Democrat get it done? Or is it just another politician who makes a lot of promises of great plans, and here we are 4 years later, and nothing's been done? I say, let's show people, let's get it done. If we can show, look, by just making the changes and making sure the existing regulations are actually adhered to, there's cleaner air, cleaner water, it's a stepping stone to the bigger picture. Right now, people still need to go every week to take their kids to school, to go to work. But in 20 years' time or 10 years' time, there'll be a much less fossil fuel. As land commissioner, I want more and more things to run on solar and things like that. So get people off fossil fuel. So it's the process of not only building safer public lands right now, but getting people weaned off their need for fossil fuels. And for example, a big issue for fossil fuels is plastics. And what I would say, and what I learned living in Europe, is that why can't we reduce the consumption of plastic in Texas? And simply by doing that, you would actually decrease the need for fossil fuels, something that simple. And it's really a good idea. But again, it's a big project, but critical to me, and I believe this very thoroughly, that if you take over on day one, you better be effective. You better get something done. So you can say to people, look, we elected the Democrat, and it was the Democrat who improved public schools. It was a Democrat who improved veterans. It was a Democrat who made the air cleaner. It's a Democrat who made disaster planning better. To show people that Democrats are the ones who need to get this done, because Republicans have proven for 28 years they're not.
All right, excellent. We're trying to get Carla in the meeting and she should be here soon. How about we'll take another question then.
I'll take a question or closing, whatever you prefer, as you wish.
Right. Let's see, I think we've got a question in the chat. Adrian, would you like to, we've got a question saying access to FEMA assistance is also important for Black Texans due to systemic racism. Would you have a comment on that and how we can overcome these difficulties?
I totally agree. And I think it's, again, I'm unhappy that in 21st century, we're still in this decade talking about this, which is why, again, I go back to what I said. There's a reason why my priorities are the safety of all Texans, no matter who you are, what your background, what your color, it doesn't matter. And secondly, that everybody is treated with equal respect. If you employ that, if you make that a part of your daily life, if that's the way it is, then there is no difference. Then these disasters of the past, these mistakes of the past, we can start correcting them. But it's an attitude shift. And you have to have the leaders saying, look, everyone's treated the same way. No one's different. Everyone gets safe. No one's different. That's a critical thing. And so I agree that we have to do that. Like in the hiring of people at the Texas Land Commissioner, those boards that are critically important, they need to be filled with people of different cultures and different backgrounds who are competent, because that's the Texas of the future. There's unity in community and there's diversity and strength. And we need to make sure as political leaders that we are unified and there is diversity, because then Texas, when it's 54 million people in 30 years' time, will be a better place to live. And at the end of the day, what you need to show people, what they want to see, is you're going to protect their jobs, you're going to help bring the economy along, but you're going to make their lives better and their families safer. And if they believe that, and that's what Democrats are about, jobs, the economy, better lives, safer lives for your family, then that's a message. But we need to get in charge to do that. That's why it's so critically important that we remember in November, the person we need to vote for is the person who can win in November. Again, for 28 years, we haven't got it right. But let's get it right this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Michael. Are there any closing words that you have for us?
I just want to say thank you for being an American abroad. It's harder to be an American abroad and get involved in politics, but communication makes it easier. I appreciate the sacrifice and how hard it is to connect Americans all over the world, and especially Texans. So thank you very much for your passion. Thank you very much for your desire. And thank you very much for being a part of this. Your vote matters. Get those ballots in. You could make a difference in a lot of different elections. So thank you very much. I appreciate what Democrats Abroad are doing in the Texan subset. Y'all are great. I'm Michael Lang. I'd love to have your vote, and let's win in November. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much for coming, Michael. We really appreciate it. All right, Dr. Braley is going to be joining us soon. We're just having a little bit of a technical difficulty. I wonder if we could go ahead and introduce and hear from Joe Jaworski, since would that be for the future?
Well, you sure can, as he finishes another bite of his ham sandwich.
Sorry to catch you off guard there.
No. If anything, those in public service must be nimble and able to respond on a dime. So it is my pleasure to be with you, Jennifer. Thank you. Shall I begin with 5 minutes and then go to questions?
Excellent. Go for it.
Excellent. Well, It is my favorite thing to connect with my brothers and sisters abroad. I was just texting with Elizabeth Myers. We went to school together years ago at the American School in London. I very proudly spent my junior and senior year of high school. It was a really fraught time in history. You'll recall in '78, the Troubles were all about in Great Britain. And in fact, during my time there, I think Mountbatten was assassinated. The first day I arrived, Keith Moon died. I mean, let me tell you, this was a time to be there, and it was sadness and greatness. So I do consider myself an expat in many regards due to that experience. But I've come back to Texas and gone to the University of Texas School of Law, and I've been licensed to practice for 31 years as an officer of the court. What I remember when I graduated law school, my Democrats abroad, my Texans abroad, is that Ann Richards was governor. I met my wife, Rebecca, in law school, and the rest is history. But let's talk about that history. Ann Richards, just an icon of leadership, progressive, cool. In the final 2 weeks of my time in law school, I met her, believe it or not, in the produce section of a local grocery store, Fresh Plus, at 43rd and Duval. She talked to me, this lowly law student, for 10 minutes easy. And what I would not give for a transcript of that conversation. Of course, I don't have one, but I do remember how the governor of the great state of Texas made me feel that day in May 1991. Was it Maya Angelou, the great poet, who said, "You may not remember what someone said to you long ago, but you will never forget how they made you feel." And such is the case with Ann Richards. She made me feel validated, understood, appreciated. And the future was so bright in May 1991. I mean, of course it was. I was graduating law school. I was about to be licensed. God willing, I would pass the bar. I did. We had a cool governor and a progressive government. And here we are, 30 years later, anxiously rubbing our hands, wistfully recalling how reasonable George W. Bush was on the matter of immigration. Really? And that's what we get now. So the descent has been steep. The consequences have been deep. And I come to the conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, that you can't trust the Texas GOP to lead our state any longer. Am I exaggerating? People are dying due to their policy decisions. Negligent mismanagement of the electrical grid. I mean, we're about to get, just deep, almost sub-zero temperatures again, like we did about a year ago. Temperatures that, by the way, would make people in Boston and Cleveland blush. But in Texas, our natural gas power grid is unprepared for it. And you can lay the blame at the GOP's leadership. People died, including my dear friend, Stephen Napier in Galveston, Texas, where I live with my family. Our precinct chair, his wife died in his arms. See, those Galveston homes aren't meant to be left alone in freezing temperatures without the benefit of what we pay for, which is natural gas and electrical heat. Another thing, negligent mismanagement of a pandemic. I mean, Jennifer, I asked Greg Abbott, do we take the shot or not, Governor? Do we take the mask or not? But he went where the money was and decided to abandon his duties under the Texas Disaster Act. What's worse is that he's preventing county judges, mayors, school boards from exercising their discretion and saving their constituents. And the Attorney General, Ken Paxton, is right there assisting him all the way, his consigliere. Now, don't get me started on Senate Bill 8, although we have to go there, the atrociously entitled Heartbeat Act, which, Jennifer, finally, for all to see, codifies the Texas war on women. And not to minimize the assault on reproductive rights, but as a lawyer, running for Texas Attorney General, I've got to share with you. Did you know that there is a small provision in the law that if you are an aider and abettor, as they would refer to your partner or the Uber driver or even the lady checking you in at Planned Parenthood behind the frosted glass, did you know that if that aider and abettor dares to hire a defense lawyer to defend them against the Heartbeat Act allegations, your lawyer, if they should do the bare minimum, which is to argue the unconstitutionality of this facially, mathematically unconstitutional law, I mean, just ignores Roe v. Wade. Did you know that the lawyer becomes jointly and severally liable for the attorney's fees should the defendant lose? I mean, we all go back to our time in England, I'm sure those of us, and really anywhere that common law applies, and hundreds of years of understanding that zealous representation, all the way back to the Magna Carta, is the basis of American jurisprudence, but not in Texas. And Ken Paxton let it happen. So watch out, folks. Now, you want to do something about it. You're angry. So let's do the civil thing and go vote. But wait a minute. Senate Bill 1 makes it harder for you to vote. Jennifer? Candace? Carol, it makes it harder for you to help someone to vote. You know, it would sure be a good thing if we had a people's attorney in the Attorney General's office to remedy these outrages. And Democrats and Texans Abroad, I'm Joe Jaworski. Your attorney has arrived. I'm asking for your vote in the March primary. I'd love to hear your questions.
Joe, thank you so much for that. Carla has joined us now, and she's on a tight schedule. We're going to let her speak with us, and then we'll come back and hear. And we also welcome Richelle Garza. She's another candidate for Attorney General. She's joined us on the call. We'll hear from Carla, and then Richelle, and we'll open it up to questions for the Attorney General.
Absolutely. I will complete my sandwich now.
Thank you. All right, Jazz, I hand it back over to you to introduce Dr. Braley.
Yes, thank you very much, Jennifer. The Lieutenant Governor is president of the Texas Senate. Unlike most other state senates, the Lieutenant Governor regularly exercises this function rather than delegating it to the majority leader. The Lieutenant Governor appoints all the committee chairs of the committees in the Senate, determines where the bills are going to be sent and to what committees and the timing, making it a critical position. The winner of the March primary will go on to face Dan Patrick, who is seeking his third term as Lieutenant Governor and leader of the Texas Senate. He is one of the state's most conservative Republicans and champion of a number of Republican priorities, including the so-called election integrity, the SB 8 abortion ban, and the stirrings about critical race theory in Texas schools. Dr. Bailey, who currently serves as the vice chair of the Texas Democratic Party, is also an assistant professor in the sociology department at Texas Southern University. She has a background in government, working in the late 2000s for Mayor Adrian Fenty in Washington, D.C., and having campaigned for Houston City Council in 2019. Dr. Bailey is the first African-American woman to run as a Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor of Texas. Dr. Bailey is a mother, educator, and political strategist running to ensure Texas has a better tomorrow for all Texas. Welcome, Dr. Carla Braley.
Thank you all for having me. This is such a delight. You all probably know I was absolutely frantic when I couldn't get into the meeting. And some of us would just keep moving because we're attending a zillion meetings a day and just, chalk it up to I couldn't get in the meeting. And I said, nope. I told staff, we're going to find out how to get into this meeting. I want to be there and be here. And so thank you for making room for me. And I know you all are going to hear from your attorney generals too. And so I am just glad to be with you. I am not new to many of you all because we started meeting some time ago in my capacity as vice chair. And so again, I'm glad that work started early because it's the work that we do today to guarantee that we have a tomorrow. And that's what we need in the state of Texas. Let me just be Up front, you all have read my bio, so you know that, that all of us that are running in these races on the Democratic side are definitely qualified. There are some distinctions, but many of us, and considering where we are in Texas and where our democracy is, I think anyone who is willing to put the people at the center rather than profits and divisiveness is pretty much qualified in terms of just putting people first. And that's who I've always tried to be as a public servant, to put people first. Some of the things that you've said in the bio, that I am a mother, I am a longtime educator for over 20 years, and a lifetime committed Democrat. But more so than anything, I am a fearless fighter. In this case, really for people that are in the margins in particular, but in the state of Texas, I really, really believe that with the current administration operating in a very mean-spirited extremist views that we see, that if we do not really address that today, we're going to have some serious issues for our children. I have a daughter who's 13, and while I'm running, she's one of the reasons why I decided that I could no longer sit on the sidelines, stand on the sidelines and watch what was happening, and having a conversation with her, and just explaining that, several people have approached me about considering running for lieutenant governor. And so, as you all know, I've said yes, but it was having a conversation with my daughter and understanding that she understood the situation that we were in the state. And she said, "Hey, Mom, I know that what that means, that means you're going to be traveling, which, I've done in some extent as vice chair, but I know what that means. But I'm going to tell you, Texas is in a very bad place. And Mom, if people are asking you to run, you have to run, you have to lead." And that's what we are, you all. I am running so that we will have one Texas united, so that we can have more fairness. People can have a better shot, a fair shot in the state of Texas, but also that we have equity in the way that we have not had in education. We really deserve, all Texans deserve, a high quality, inclusive education where they can see themselves in their books, where teachers can have better opportunities to even feel more protected in the classroom. All of us have suffered and experienced this pandemic, and it's been some pros and cons, but much of it we've had to figure out. And I know that our schools have not been first in that whatever priorities we have in the state of Texas, we cannot afford not to really put the finances, the funding that we need for a traditional public school system. We know that charter schools are here, but the reality is we cannot circumvent the process in which all students deserve a fair shot in terms of education, and it should not be dictated by their zip code. Those are the things that are very important to me. Healthcare. Healthcare should be affordable. It should be accessible. And quite frankly, we have to expand Medicaid. The reality is we're leaving over $10 million on the table just because we want to be long rangers and not partner. And those are the things that we have to say no to, because that means we're not putting people first. We have some of the highest uninsured rates in the country. And so we don't want to be known in that for Texas. We're big in Texas, and we want to do big things like partnering and bringing various stakeholders. When we look at the birth rates that are impacting Black mothers and Black maternal and mortality and morbidity rates, we have some of the highest ones in the state of Texas, but yet we have the world's largest premier medical center in the state of Texas. So we can do better. And then I can go on and on about priorities. I want to leave some room if you have questions for me. But, when we talk about education, we talk about jobs, everyone deserves a fair shot. And that means that we're going to have to look at how do we increase wages, and how do we make sure that even those wages tie into the premiums, the high premiums that so many employers, or I should say employees, have to pay. Those are really important. And you all know what we've experienced. And we still don't know what kind of winter we're going to have with the grid. Those are, just a matter of the type of appointments that the lieutenant governor gets to make. And we know that after this election, we're not necessarily going to have a a flip of the House or the Senate. So whoever is Lieutenant Governor, and I plan on that being me with your support, of course, you know, we have to be able to be willing to work across the lines, and we have to be able to make those hard decisions of what type of appointments we make. And whatever those appointments are, those leaders, those chairs of those committees have to be willing to say, we're going to put people first, and we're going to do the job that deals high with oversight and transparency. And at the end of the day, put the values, these democratic values, up front. And the reality is we have to work together, because I really believe that we are facing an anti-democratic movement in the state of Texas. And so goes Texas, goes this nation. And I'm ready to do the work. As vice chair, I've traveled this entire state. And I just want to make sure that the relationships that are already out there, that are pretty strong, that we get them involved to make sure that we're doing the work on the ground. I've said it for years. We win Texas when we do the work on the ground. We win Texas locally. And guess what? I'm here because we win Texas with you all support even abroad. And you are just as important. We are all important in this game. And I say game because right now we're, you know, the way this administration has played with the lives and livelihood of Texans, we cannot stand for that. So I'm here. I'm so glad for the invitation. I'm so glad for your dedication, both in and outside of Texas. Thank you very much, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Braley. We're going to turn it over to our Global Women's Caucus. Sally, you've got a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you and welcome. I do represent the DA Global Women's Caucus, and we are, to say the least, appalled about the complete annihilation of women's rights in Texas. So I won't go on because I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. My question to you is, what are you going to promise to the women Texas voters that are listening to you about SB 8, and how are you going to get rid of it if you at all think you can get rid of it?
Well, you know, the reality is, you know, I'm going to address two, which I didn't say in the opening, that rights are important. Democracy is at stake. We cannot remain in this situation. When we talk about both voting rights and women's rights, the heartbeat bill, you know, quite frankly, to say that there are, number one, I think many of us on this call believe that we all should work on saving lives. And however we can do to sustain life, that's what we should all be a part. And that should have nothing to do with party affiliation. It should have everything to do with humanity. And so who would have thought in the 21st century that we would even be dealing with the issue of not saving lives and not putting women first? That bill was not even just a target of women. It was a target even for people who help women. It was a target even for men who help women. This is not just about women and pro-choice. It is about being able to be free. Our rights are at stake. I want to tie that into voting rights. Voting rights are our voice. And that has, again, nothing to do with being a Democrat or Republican. Each one of us right now, as I'm speaking to you all, we may differ on issues, but where we should remain the same is how we accept and embrace, not just tolerate, but celebrate humanity. And so in the 21st century, rather than expanding voting rights, in the state of Texas, we're leading the way to restrict voting rights. And just a mere fact of how we have to think innovative, their innovation was even trying to push a bill that was going to include people who have disabilities to have to require a doctor's note, you all. And we're already talking about where people are staying in terms of health care. So for me, may I call you Sally? Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Sally, for me, I think we have to deal with all of those in one as we look at protecting our rights. And I'm gonna tell you, I really believe just like we can work together as public servants and look at other states so we can mimic and some of their best policies. Other states, the more conservative states, are watching to see what Texas is doing. And that is why we cannot say yes to any of this. We have to be able to stand. So to answer your question, I think that we have to broaden the table of stakeholders. And I think those are some of the first things that we have to do when in entering office, that we have to overturn we have a lot to overturn. And that's why when people ask, particularly when we're, talking to various groups, they say, well, give us 3 priorities. You all, I wish I could just give you 3 priorities. No, we need a leader that understands that all of these, there are a lot of priorities and they're all interwoven. They're all they're inextricably linked. And we're going to have to do it all at one time. But I would say that number one, we're just going to have to, we're going to have to flip it. And we're going to have to flip it on day one. Just the mere fact that to think that a woman, regardless of, we won't even talk about religious views, but a woman who've experienced rape, really cannot make decisions over her body. I can't believe that we're revisiting that in 2021. I hope I answered your question, but I think it's just a matter of saying no. And on day one, you have to flip many of the legislative efforts that have gone forward. We have a lot of work to do on day one.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have a question in the chat from the co-chair of our Veterans and Military Families Caucus in France and a Texas voter, asking if you have been to Fort Hood and BAMC, and what would you do to help our veterans and active military and to prevent what happened in Fort Hood from happening again?
Well, let me tell you, even as vice chair, I pride myself that whoever invited me to go wherever, if I could, I said yes. I continue to be that way. So if you're inviting me, let's make it happen. We're on a campaign trail and there's no reason why we can't. We can figure out a time, whether it's breakfast or whatever. So let's connect after that, after this. And if you don't mind sharing my information, I will, welcome that to anyone. In terms of, this still falls under safety and the decisions that we're making. And quite frankly, just how we revere our veterans. I think number one, we all, have to continue to strive to be diverse. We have to strive to make sure that women are included in what we do in terms of, both in promotions and how in treatment. But I think that, where will we be without our soldiers? When I think about some of the safety that we're facing right now, the reality is it's a shame that some of our soldiers have dedicated their lives and still may not have the housing or the job opportunities that you deserve, because quite frankly, even with what we've recently experienced under this regime, we know what soldiers and what law enforcement are facing, even in the Rio Grande area and in the border area. We know that soldiers are being asked to do things and not being treated very well. So, I mean, I think it's just a matter of not only respect, but those who are leading and making decisions, and to not put soldiers, whether in Fort Hood or wherever, into situations that they don't have to be. But again, that means that you have to have veterans at the table. And so what we're seeing with this administration is really failed leadership, that it's only a few that's at the tables. There are only a few that are serving as stakeholders. And many of us and many of you have not been a part of any of these decisions. And so those are the things that we have to be able to change.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Anna Marie, you would like to,
Yes, I'd like to add on that, because I asked you a question if you've ever been to BAMC in San Antonio. That's the severe burn hospital.
Oh, I'm so sorry. No, I'm so sorry. I thought you meant, had I ever been to San Antonio? No, I've not. I've not been there.
Okay.
And yeah,
Well,
I have not. And mass shoot, I mean, and that connects to gun violence and some other things that have happened. And we cannot, gun safety is absolutely, we've had a lot of liberal policies in the state of Texas. We know our culture in Texas, but the reality is we definitely need to make sure that we have gun safety. We should have more conservative efforts in how we make sure that we save lives. And I think part of that is, the red flag laws, working with Moms Against action, demands action. All of those are important, but I don't know, was it Anna?
No, it's Anna Marie. The reason why I asked this question is
Mm.
about what do we do with our veterans? Because the Black Lives Matter parade, you know what happened in Dallas. It was a veteran that went crazy. And so what are we doing to help our veterans with their mental illnesses, PTSD? What would you do as Lieutenant Governor? Because we definitely have a problem in Texas. What happened at Fort Hood with the soldier getting killed that by active military. And then, so my question is, what would you do to help overcome this? And our VAs in Texas are a disaster. I mean, our VA hospitals, would that be in your jurisdiction to help make them better? Because my husband my first cousin died in a VA hospital right after a heart surgery. So I mean, and there was no reason. It was a normal surgery. So there are a lot of things that are going on at the VA hospitals, parking lot suicides. So my question is, Lieutenant Governor, what would you do to keep this from happening and make our VA system better and help our veterans?
Well, Anna, first let me say, I'll lift you up in terms of your loss. Quite frankly, I think that we have to put the funding there, but we also have to have the conversations that we're not having. And I don't want to combine all marginalized groups, but when we look at the foster care system in the state of Texas, when we look at reentry citizens, when we look at the treatment of veterans, and when we look at people who happen to have issues related to mental illness, we have just not in this leadership. Many of those marginalized groups have been underserved. So the first thing you do as a lieutenant governor is you create these committees that can really, develop planning. Right now we have children, foster children, who have not been placed. And I don't want I'm not, my intentions is to not go from one population to the next. And because I know your question was very specific around veterans, but I'm just making the point that this particular administration has not really provided services for any of the marginalized communities. And so I think that's what you do. You make sure that funding is not only there, but you also make sure that hiring freezes, that we've had in various counties, that we work to make sure that they not only have the budget, but people are trained, people are considered, and the oversight is there. So even some areas or organizations that may be getting funded through in terms of more privatization efforts are not having the oversight. So they may be getting funding, but at the same time, they may not be providing the services they need. And that's what that's the start, the planning of it, the oversight of it, and the transparency. And quite frankly, I'm not saying that I think Anna Marie, that's overly easy to do, but I do think that it's 48 of us on this call. I would probably say at least 5 of us may have expertise in that area. And we need to bring people that do that work to the table so that we can have the policies and legislation that we need to legislate in a way that takes mental illness into account. And we know that mental illness is not just associated with veterans. We know that people all over our country, and many of us, may have some matters that are connected to mental illness.
Dr. Bradley, we thank you so much for joining us today on our call. And we're going to skip ahead now to our Attorney General candidates. We really appreciate your time, and we wish you the best on your campaign trail, and look forward to meeting with you again soon as Texans Abroad. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. You all have a good day, and thank you for doing this work and showing up. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much. All right, we're going to go over to our Hispanic caucus to introduce Richelle Garza, and then we'll open it up to questions for both Joe and Richelle.
Thank you so much. Hi, my name is Cynthia. I am from the Hispanic caucus, the lead translator, and I'm introducing Richelle Garza. Richelle Garza is a fronteriza and a lifelong fighter for the border communities of the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. She believes that it doesn't matter who you are, where you live, everyone deserves a fair shot to get ahead. As a lawyer, Richelle has fought for the people, serving Texas and championing children, immigrants, and working families who too often find themselves the victims of the powerful. She has spent her career fighting for the civil rights of children, immigrants, and families. She took on Donald Trump, Ken Paxton, and Brett Kavanaugh when they tried to prevent an immigrant teen, Jane Doe, from exercising her right to choose, and won. Her work on that case resulted in the Garza Notice, which requires detained teens to be notified of their right to abortion free of retaliation and obstruction by the federal government. She fought against Donald Trump's devastating zero-tolerance immigration policies of family separation, denial of access to the ports of entry for asylum-seeking families and individuals, and restrictions of reproductive rights for unaccompanied minors. As Attorney General, Richelle will use her legal expertise in immigration, family, and criminal law to fight for Texas families. We look forward to hearing from you, Richelle.
Well, thank you all. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. I just want to say thank you for being here and for making time in your day to hear from all of us. I know you're in different time zones, and I know how challenging that can be in terms of it being much later over there than it is over here. So I'm Richelle Garza. I'm running for Texas Attorney General, and I'm doing this because I want to fight for Texas families, because Texans deserve to have an attorney general that is going to look out for their civil rights, their health, and their safety. I always like to share a little bit about myself first, and just sort of what my values are and what motivates me and why I've done the work that I've done. I'm from the Rio Grande Valley. I'm from a border community in South Texas. I'm a 5th generation Texan. I'm an expecting mom. I'm expecting my first child, a daughter, in April. And, my parents are from the region. They were both public school teachers, and they really enforced or really stress the importance of fighting for what's right and fighting for the community, and that every single person deserves dignity and respect. My dad started off life as a farmer. He was one of 13 kids before he became a public school teacher. And then he ended up going to law school and then became a judge at the very young age of 30. And my mom was raised by a World War II veteran and a really hardworking mom that ended up going back to work after raising her 3 kids, and headed up a municipal credit union. So I come from a long line of people that really care about their community, that really stress the importance of giving back. And I also grew up in a household with a sibling with disabilities. My oldest brother experienced a traumatic brain injury during childbirth, and he required a lot of care. And I saw my parents fight for him, just like so many people across the state and so many people across the country do every single day for their families. And I really learned that we're not okay as a family unless all of us are okay. And that's how I look at community. That's how I look at being an attorney, and why I focus so much on making sure that I represent people that have been overlooked and left behind in our legal system, because they have not been contemplated, and their rights matter just as much as everyone's rights. All of our rights are dependent on everyone's rights. So, I have extensive experience in family law, criminal defense work, immigration, and constitutional law, civil rights, and class action lawsuits. So I have a lot of intersectional understandings of the law and how it's impacted different communities. And this is something that I uniquely bring to this race and will bring into this office. I know we've already kind of touched on my background in representing Jane Doe, who was an immigrant teen in custody who was denied access to abortion care by the Trump administration. That was an incredibly difficult case to take on because it straddled so many different areas of law. But it also started with someone that Donald Trump, Ken Paxton, because he did try to involve himself, and Brett Kavanaugh, who's now sitting on the Supreme Court, they all believed she didn't matter, and they all believed that her rights didn't matter. And they tried to use her to push this anti-choice agenda to chip away at reproductive rights. So we were able to not only ensure that she got the care that she needed, but really enforce reproductive rights across the country. And it all started with this young woman who was an immigrant in a detention center that decided to stand up for her rights. And I was blessed to represent her and to fight for her and to be able to accomplish something so important. And that is something that I know that we all have on the top of our minds in Texas. Texas women have been under a lot of stress and a lot of strain since since the 6-week abortion ban was implemented. And then in December, we also saw the ban on medication abortion come into effect, which is also another layer of difficulty for women in the state of Texas to access their right to reproductive health care and to really determine what course they want in their own lives and their own futures. So, I'm running for this position to fight for civil rights, to fight for reproductive choice, voting rights, make sure that we hold people accountable for what happened with our energy grid failing. So consumer protection is another thing that the Attorney General's office can focus on. And that has been completely neglected by our current Attorney General. Not only is he under indictment, not only is he under FBI investigation, and he's used his office to harm Texas families, he has chipped away at people's voting rights. And I've seen that very acutely throughout the state. Late last year, we were notified by some folks that their family members were receiving letters saying, you need to verify your citizenship in order to stay on the voter registration rolls. And, these are people that had been citizens for more than 10 years, that had been consistent voters for more than 10 years. And, if they did not respond, then they were purged. So we saw over 2,400 people purged that way in the state of Texas in November of 2021. Obviously, this isn't right. Obviously, the Attorney General did not do anything about it, investigate or hold anyone accountable for why that happened. We are at a critical moment in Texas in terms of our civil rights, in terms of the direction of the state, in terms of the direction of the country, because this position not only impacts Texas, it impacts the rest of the country, because Ken Paxton likes to partner with other states in order to chip away at the things that we need, chip away at the Affordable Care Act, chip away at democracy by challenging the election. So I am ready to fight for all of Texas and fight for all of you, including everyone who is abroad. Do not lose hope. There is still, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. He is very vulnerable, and we just need to make sure we have the right candidate. And I believe that I am that candidate. So thank you so much for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Richelle. I'm so sorry, everyone. We're running a little bit long, so we'll do some lightning round questions now for Joe and Richelle. We have a question from our Hispanic caucus, and we'll start then with Joe and take about a minute, and then back to Richelle for another minute. Cynthia, go ahead.
Thank you. So recent voter suppression rules will make it harder for voters, in particular those of us abroad in communities of color, which I am both, if elected candidates. How would you advocate and take actions against these rules, if at all?
Well, let me just say Ken Paxton is very proud of his voter fraud unit. Well, the unit itself is a fraud. So my pledge to you is, upon taking the oath and raising this hand for sure, I will take the ashes of his voter fraud unit and turn it into General Jaworski's voter access unit. Now, this can take so many things off the table. We're going to enforce principals registering every 18-year-old. Okay, that is a law on the state of Texas. Can you imagine the transformative effect of Texas, which is predominantly becoming a state of color, starting at age 18 and making sure that our young voters accept the franchise of American citizenship, it becomes a habit. We will change the state. It'll be transformative. As to generally the suppression efforts, this will be a clearinghouse where people can call the government if their voting rights are trod upon, and we will be their advocate.
Thank you so much, Joe. Richelle, would you like to answer that question?
So I mean, obviously voting rights is, I touched upon it when I was speaking. One of the things that I envisioned for my office is to actually have a fully funded civil rights division and then have units underneath that division. So having a voter protection unit and obviously dismantling the quote unquote voter integrity unit that Ken Paxton has, and actually address some of those things that my campaign was hearing about at the end of last year, and making sure that people are held accountable. So investigating why those letters were sent out, investigating why half of the mail-in ballot requests for Travis County were thrown out, and then making sure that we hold people accountable through the powers of the Attorney General's office. I know you all are much more at risk of losing your voting rights in terms of mail-in ballots, and that is, it's abhorrent, and it's obviously anti-democratic. So I want to make sure that we use every power of the office to support voting rights, and to make sure that we're in constant communication with different communities. I recognize that you can't address a problem if you don't have a connection to the community that's experiencing the problem. So making sure that we have liaisons with Texans Abroad and with communities of color that are experiencing voter suppression, and to make sure that we have that direct communication to address any problem.
Thank you so much, Richelle. Now we've got another question from our Global Women's Caucus.
Yes, hi. Thank you to both candidates for the Attorney General's position. The Global Women's Caucus is absolutely appalled about what's going on in the United States, and particularly in Texas, with regard to reproductive freedom. So my question, and I keep asking the same question, and I'm not getting any answers, concrete answers, is, if elected, what will you do about SB 8, and how can we get rid of it? I understand it's a complicated legal situation. I'm a lawyer, but you're running for office. So tell me, practically speaking, what are you going to do? Thank you.
Who would you like to start first?
Why don't we let Richelle start first?
Well, I appreciate you wanting a firm answer, and I'm going to do my best to give you a firm answer, because this is an area that I deeply care about. As I mentioned, I want to have that unit. The thing is that SB 8 has already been litigated up to the Supreme Court, and it keeps getting bounced around. We already know what's going to happen with it. It's right now before the Texas Supreme Court on a very narrow issue. So the courts are tying it up. Come, taking office in January of 2023, it's going to be a different game at that point, right? So making sure, I mean, Roe v. Wade may fall. It looks very likely that it will fall come next summer, unfortunately. I am someone that has always worked with reproductive rights organizations. I know how important it is to think about these issues critically and creatively. I think that there are ways to challenge, at least with regards to the medication abortion that I mentioned earlier, we can challenge that through the Commerce Clause possibly, because the FDA has said that medication abortion should be mailed across the country. Texas is saying no, it shouldn't. So that might be a way of challenging that. As far as SB 8, we can, intervene on any individual cases. That's what I would imagine using the office for, is trying to intervene anytime a case is filed in Texas courts to using SB 8 to use the bounty mechanism. But there's got to be creativity, and there's got to be collaboration. And I say that as someone who has tried to really creatively challenge, anti-choice policies, especially with the Jane case. I mean, we filed a family case against a detention center. We filed for habeas, and it was very creative and it didn't work, but we had other avenues to make sure that we were able to get our client the justice that she deserved. So I hope I answered as best I could.
It's a hard ball. I understand. Thank you.
But Sally, you really do hit it, because, the Attorney General's office has often been described as the intersection of law and politics. And the assault on reproductive freedom goes beyond just those words. It is an assault on women. And, just like women were forbidden from voting for, 100 years plus from the inception of our country, you have just as much right to determine your course of living as I do as a man. Absolutely 100%. So I'm tired of playing defense on this with these people, shouting life and Christianity or whatever their raison d'etre may be. I want to take this on the offensive. So whatever's left of Roe v. Wade, and we'll see after that Mississippi case is decided in June. If there is still something left of it, then you can expect myself as Attorney General to reverse the position of our pleadings in the Senate Bill 8 to assert the unconstitutionality of Senate Bill 8. And secondly, I think there is a strong argument, and there always has been, that this is really an equal protection. It takes two to create life, but one has to manage it. Just because the law says so, it's unfair. If you want true equality under the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution, then I think this is a great example. So perhaps we just go on the offensive and file that lawsuit.
How about introducing a bill that makes it criminal to have a vasectomy? What do you think about that?
Wouldn't that be justice? I've seen people make jokes about that, but truly that is equality.
Thank you, Sally. We're going to take one more question from our Global Progressive Caucus for Richelle and Joe. And I just want to thank you so much for coming to speak to us today and for sharing. If you'd like to give a couple of final thoughts after you answer the question from the Progressive Caucus, we'd appreciate that. Thank you so much for your time and for your passion. It has really been a pleasure to hear from both of you today.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Richelle and Joe, for being here with us today. Our question for both of you is, as Attorney General, what will you do to ensure that all Texans have access to affordable health care? Do you support Medicare for all, or at least expanding Medicare to include eyesight, dental, and hearing coverage? Thank you.
Right. Richelle, shall I do this one first? Okay. So Caitlin, thanks for that question. Yeah, Texas, used to be braggadocio about everything. We're number one. And of course, we are number 50 or so on the matter of public health. So I will certainly, on day one of my office holding, file the necessary paperwork to dismiss every case brought against the Affordable Care Act. And I'll do it by lunch. Now, what that means is we will finally be in a position where a statewide constitutional executive says, enough of this, federal tyranny straw man. Let's accept our money. It's our tax dollars that we pay devotedly every April, trying to come back to Texas in the form of a Medicaid match. So your specific question of Medicare for all, hey, guess what? I'll be 65 in about 5 years. So, I suppose I'll be getting it soon. It makes perfect sense. That is, of course, a legislative decision. And if the Texas legislature wants to do that, the United States Congress wants to do that, I will certainly support it. But as Attorney General, I'm going to work within a very conservative state, and I'm going to bang the drum loudly that we accept the full Medicaid match, which is truly worth billions, Caitlin. And that will be something that will let people that are on perhaps the lower income side of life get full health care. And dismissing all the Affordable Care Act litigation is a real signal of that as well. County and urban, rural, et cetera, hospitals all need this money to thrive. Thank you.
So healthcare is something that is very personal for me. And I had mentioned, watching my parents struggle to get healthcare for my brother, Robbie. And I distinctly remember them fighting to get coverage for a wheelchair lift just to get him to school. And this was much earlier. So this was before we had the ACA that protected people from pre-existing conditions. I absolutely will fight or dismantle any of the litigation that we do have against the Affordable Care Act. I believe that healthcare is an absolute human right. And that we need to do everything that we can to ensure that everyone has access to healthcare, including Medicaid expansion. It may not be Medicare for all as the vehicle for getting us there, but I fully support everyone having access to quality medical care, and ensuring that we give people these basic protections because we deserve to have them. We're all taxpayers. We're all supporting the system. We're all working. And even if we're not working, we're all putting into this society, and we deserve to be taken care of as well. So that's my position. Ultimately, I will use the office to ensure that people are not victims of bad actors when it comes to health insurance coverage. There is a huge issue with Medicaid denials. I've worked in nonprofits. I've worked with Disability Rights Texas when I was in law school, and I saw that was a big issue happening in Texas. And I know that there are divisions that these nonprofits are trying to fill, and they're trying to do what they can to ensure that the Texans get the medical coverage that they need. And they're going to have an ally in the Attorney General's office that understands the intersection of healthcare and poverty and all of the things that are difficult for Texans. I mean, if you are dealing with medical debt, it is the #1 debt that people have in the United States, you're not going to have enough money to pay the rent or pay the bills. I know how difficult that is. So to answer your question, yes, I am fully on board with healthcare and making sure that everyone has access for it.
Once again, thank you so much to our two phenomenal candidates for Attorney General. That was Richelle Garza and Joe Jaworski, and we truly appreciate your time, and it was phenomenal to hear from you. And we thank you for coming to speak to Democrats Abroad, to Texans living all across the globe. Very much appreciated.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. We have one more candidate to hear from tonight. Rebecca Villagran for Texas's 35th Congressional District has been waiting patiently. Thank you so much for joining us, Rebecca. And I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin Kennedy to introduce you.
All right, I'm back again. Can you hear me? I'm getting a weird notification. Okay, then I'll just ignore this pop-up I got. All right. Yes, thank you, Jennifer. It's my pleasure now to introduce Rebecca Villagran, who's running for Texas's 35th House Congressional District. The district is a heavily Hispanic district running from Austin and Travis County along I-35 to parts of San Antonio and Bexar County. It's rated as a solidly Democratic district by the Cook Report. So the winner of the March 1st Democratic primary will become the presumptive winner come November. So this is a really, really important primary for us. But please note that if none of the 4 primary candidates wins 50% of the vote on March 1st, then the top 2 will face a runoff in May. So Rebecca was born and raised in San Antonio to a working class family, graduated from Texas State and earned a master's in public administration from St. Mary's University. She won a seat on the San Antonio City Council in 2013, serving with distinction until 2021 when she was term limited out. She chaired the Economic and Workforce Development Committee and served on the board of the National League of Cities. Rebecca led on issues like raising the minimum wage, pay equity, passing San Antonio's first equity budget, fighting racism, and expanding non-discrimination protection for LGBTQIA+ workers. She also led the campaign to have the Alamo designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site and worked to have a new medical school located in her district. She is currently Director of Workforce Development at Texas A&M University. Rebecca will tell us why she's running for this House seat and what issues are critical to her community. So Rebecca, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction. And I have to say, I've enjoyed listening to all of the candidates because Even though I've done so many of these, this has been very, very robust and a lot of substance to these conversations. And as a voter in Texas too, I need to know what my candidates are saying as well. Again, thank you. What I shared earlier, thank you, Democrats Abroad. What I shared earlier was in 1999 and 2000, I lived in Granada, Spain, abroad. And during my time living abroad, it was the 2000 elections between Gore and Bush, and having to live and make sure that my ballot was sent and counted. It was, and not know who my president was. It was a very stressful time living abroad. So I thank you for your work. I thank you for your organization to make sure that Democrats living abroad has efficiency and can work together. As was shared by Caitlin, thank you. I am born and raised in San Antonio, Texas. I was proud to serve the largest city council district in the 7th largest city in the United States. And I was proud to make sure that we made so many advancements. My district prior to serving was a redlined community and was not getting its fair share of dollars as it was needed for infrastructure, to make sure that we were getting the investments that we had paid for into our city taxes for so long. I've been a community leader. I've been a teacher, a women's and citizens advocate, and a government representative. I'm tireless, imaginative, and a compassionate and fearless leader. And I am running because representation matters. And I have fought for justice for everyone, and not just those people who could afford it or those who just knew how to get it. I have the experience working with people and working in Washington, D.C., delivering results. What my time on the San Antonio City Council, I served on the Intergovernmental Relations Committee, working to make sure that the city of San Antonio and our community got a federal courthouse, dollars drawn down for a federal courthouse, as well as making sure that we had the historic tax preservation credits put back into the budget. Now, too much is at stake when it comes to the assault on women's rights, on our reproductive rights, when it comes to the assault on our voting rights, when it comes to affordable housing, healthcare, climate change, and empowering our working families. What I will do when I am elected to Congress, and I am working hard for that, is we need to codify Roe versus Wade. We've already heard from our two candidates for Texas AG. We see that it is flailing and that we're very concerned that it will fail and fall and at the Supreme Court. So we need to do what we can right now and codify it, because we know if Roe goes, then that means anything can go in the future. We need to pass the Equality Act. We need to increase the minimum wage federally. There is no reason why Americans should be working for $7.25 an hour. That is just not a livable wage and impacts how we have housing affordability and our working families. We need to also cancel existing student debt, pass a pathway for our DACA recipients right away, and make sure we have Medicaid expansion. There are too many in Congress who don't know what it means to, number one, be a woman, and number two, what it means to live paycheck to paycheck. Texans and Democrats and voters, we want their elected representatives to solve problems and to deliver results that will last. And I have done that while on the San Antonio City Council, and I will do that as serving as member of Congress. While on council, I did raise the minimum wage for all city employees to $15 an hour. We advanced pay equity and women's issues, including giving more incentives for small minority women-owned businesses. We declared racism as a public health crisis because we saw the health disparities in the city and in Texas, where if you drew a line across the city of San Antonio, if you were below that line, you are anticipated to live 20 years less than those who lived north of that line. We have to work on the health disparities. I expanded the San Antonio non-discrimination ordinance, and I proudly testified against the bathroom bill in 2017 at the Texas Capitol, as well as spoke out against this anti-trans legislation during this past session. Again, I passed the equity budget to invest more tax dollars into those red line communities, those former red line communities, and also tackled food insecurity and homelessness in San Antonio. Also worked to expand pre-K for essay for 4-year-olds in the city of San Antonio, and continuing now to work on childcare and early childcare for the city of San Antonio and the region. When it comes to housing affordability, during my entire time in the city council, not once did I increase the city property taxes, as well as we instituted a local homestead exemption to make sure that legacy homeowners and people who have lived in their houses and are now being gentrified can get some more relief. We also worked on owner-occupied rehab. We also helped with these homeowners to increase or to get cleared titles and to make sure that they can have that stability in their home. And not only that, we also created tenants' rights and making sure that if you are going to build, if you are a private organization and wanting to build housing affordability, multifamily apartment complex, that you had to work with the city in order to put tenants' rights forward. And that passed. Also, we instituted a climate action and adaptation plan. We saw where then Trump took us out of the Paris Climate Agreement. We as a city signed back on, but not only that, we put SA Climate Ready in order to make sure that we could reduce our greenhouse gases and also build some of the most advanced green build policies in the city, in the region. Continue to work on that. We have to do that at a federal level. When it comes to immigration, while my time on council, I worked hard to institute an immigration legal services and liaison. So those individuals that have been living and working and community members are facing bad policy and attacks from ICE and others for deportation, that we had a legal services fund in the city of San Antonio. My years in government have taught me to listen, how to gently compromise, and how to be hard as nails and fight like hell when lives are at stake. And I will use my decades of experience in collaboration as an effective leader to represent this entire area. It's over 100 miles long, and its narrowest, it's only 1 mile long. And I do believe we have an opportunity to break another glass ceiling and send the first woman ever into this seat for Central and South Texas. I ask for your vote. I thank you for your time. And I ask for you to vote Villagran, Rebecca Villagran for Congress in Texas 35. I want to make history, and I do thank you, and I'm ready for any questions you may have.
Thank you so much for speaking with us, Rebecca. That is just, it's exciting just to hear. We've got our first question from our Global Black Caucus.
Yes, hello, Rebecca, and thank you very much for this very energetic part that you just brought. I think that hyped all of us very much to go out and cast our votes. As a member of Congress, how would you support, protect, and include LGBTIQ plus people of color policies? And how would you bridge the divide between fellow Congress people who have a different stance on protecting the voices and votes of LGBTIQ plus people of color? Thank you very much.
Thank you for that question. And when it comes to number one, as I shared, I believe we need to pass the Equality Act. And that is one of the first things on our agenda that we should be moving forward. I have been an advocate and an ally with the LGBTQIA+ community. And when it comes to working with others who may have other viewpoints or other ways of thinking, what we need to do is remember that common ground in all levels, we are all someone's friend, family member, daughter, son. And there is an innate level of dignity that all people have the right to have, and all people have the right to love whomever they choose, and all families have the right to adopt when we need to adopt children who are looking for families. So in talking to that, it is about making sure that we have coalitions together. It's about making sure that our teams and our coalitions and our allies and organizations can work together to talk to those other members of Congress who may not see it the same way, but who will get a number one personal story, but then also see the bottom line that when you have all voices at the table, when you have individuals who are helping create safer neighborhoods, who are creating great opportunities for your small business, for your schools, that they are everybody is part of an important fabric and link in our democracy. And so, and in our country. So I think that's what we need to do in order to get people who do not think the same way, is just share our stories and make sure that they see themselves in that story. They're not just themselves, but their families in that story and their constituents in that story. So I think that's something that's crucial. And then make sure that whatever policy we move forward when we're creating, that we do not have unintended consequences that then leave out members of our LGBTQIA plus community, but that they see this policy and crafting this legislation to make sure that we do not have that unintended consequences or things that could have gaps in our community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. We'll take one more question from our Global Hispanic Caucus, and I just want to thank you. And if you'd like to say some closing words after that question, feel free. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Thank you. Rebecca, so this is the same question that the other candidates had, and you've already discussed something about being abroad and knowing what this feels like, but recent voter suppression rules have made it harder, or will make it harder for voters, and particularly those of us who are abroad and communities of color. So if elected, how would you advocate and take action against those rules, if at all?
Well, as you can imagine, being a local elected official and a city official during the 2020 election, we were trying to open up more voting facilities. We were trying to open up 24 hours facilities. We were trying to expand the drive-through voting, as well as more seniors, getting people, our senior citizens, to make it easier for them to vote. And even at a city level, because that's handled at the county, it was so difficult. But what we did consistently was make sure that the governor and the attorney general at the time knew where we were coming from. Now, at a federal level, what we need to do is pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and move that forward. I do believe, and I'm so sad that we did not get the votes that we needed to end the filibuster, because that is something that we need to continue to fight and continue to make sure that we have that momentum to get the big bills that we need to move forward. So those are some that I would work on, and then having to work creatively, because we need to make sure that people who are also sitting on the courts in the federal level, in the appeals, that we have members in the court who will still look at the law, but still know that this is about community. This is about our neighborhoods. So I would not say that I would do anything against the law, of course not, but we need to make sure that our communities are organized and up and know all about what is happening in the law, with the law, the word of the law, the language of the law, but that we can still work through organizing together and make sure that we have the rights to the polls, to make sure that we are prepared, to make sure that we do have the organization, the teams organized, and have the conversations much earlier and much broader than before. So those are some of the things that I work out, and make sure that it's it's accessible in all languages and in all forms, not just digital, but also in hard copy, or if they need to do something over the phone, that there are many ways for people, mediums for people to get organized and for people to get that access to the polls.
Awesome. Rebecca, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for sharing all of this inspirational, all of your inspirational ideas. And I wish I didn't live in Abilene. I wish I lived in your district because I see what amazing candidates that there are. And I know that it'll be a hard decision for all of us. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you coming to talk to us. And please let all of your friends and family know that they can vote from overseas. It's so important to get the overseas vote out. And that's what we're here for. We're here to help them too. If you know anybody living overseas, let them know we're here. All right.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for your time and your service and staying engaged. It's been wonderful to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. In closing, I would like to give a big shout out to all of our amazing volunteers, both on camera and behind the scenes, and let everyone on the call know that all Democrats Abroad teams would love to have your help because we are a 100% volunteer-run organization. So please consider stepping up as a volunteer. Our link is in the chat box. Also, your support goes a long way because we are also a 100% volunteer funded organization. And so you can visit our link, democratsabroad.org/donate. So we can continue to bring more events like these to American voters around the world. And even a small donation helps us to reach more Texas voters and voters living everywhere around the world. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us on the call today. I do not know about you, but this has me even more excited to cast my primary ballot to have right here. I think I'll be filling it out. I was waiting for this event to finish it off. We are so fortunate to have had such an amazing group of candidates come and speak to us. And I see that the work on the ground in Texas is really sowing great rewards. And we're thankful that you came to see us, that you gave us your time today. Please remember, if you're a Texas voter, that primary ballots have already started going out. If you have not gotten yours yet, please do contact your county clerk right away. If you haven't requested yours yet, you can do that in only a few minutes at votefromabroad.org. And we encourage you to do that. Get set to go vote in the primary. If you've already received your ballot, remember it must be postal mailed back, and do that as soon as possible. It has to be received by March 7th and postmarked by the date of the election, March 1st. We've got a detailed voting guide and ballot return instructions that you can refer to. And please, if you have any questions, reach out to our team. We are happy to help. Our email address is texans-abroad@democratsabroad.org. And we are here to answer any questions that you have. Thank you everyone for joining us today on this amazing panel. I hope you're as inspired as I am, and we appreciate your time and everything that you're doing to get out the vote across the globe in Texas. We'll end the recording now, and if anybody wants to stay around and chat, we can open it up for a few more minutes.